Okay, so a few people have asked me about the best way to cool the engine down. So I'm with Romi here from GRM Performance. I know we've installed these ultra-cool oil coolers on a couple of bikes now. So what do you think is the main benefit? I mean, there's things like, which I've seen, Jug Fans. How do they compare to these oil coolers?
Well, they have the same basic purpose as the oil cooler. The difference is those fans, they cool the motor from outside.
Yep.
The oil cooler cools the motor from inside. There are clear differences, obviously, in between the two. Obviously, the fans, they're doing a pretty good job, especially on low speeds. When you go in traffic, it's definitely something that helps instead of not having anything. Are they better than the oil cooler, especially on low speeds? I will say probably that's a good subject for the Mythbusters because realistically you really have to try. But they're definitely less neater than an oil cooler, which is far more slick, far less noisy, and definitely it will do at least at low speeds. It will definitely do at least as a good a job as the fans. But when it comes to, as soon as the bike starts moving, the oil cooler is definitely something that you want on the bike. Those fans, they were always, their main design was to help the bike cool down when you sit in traffic and the bike doesn't move. The oil cooler, it has the purpose of cooling down the motor when you use it in low speeds and on high performance when you push the bike right to its edge. As we talked before, when you have a motor which has double the power that was designed to deliver from factory, then obviously generates heaps more heat that you try to get rid of. And when you rev the bike right up and it goes in its full swing, those fans, they're not going to help you much. So you do need an oil cooler.
So how do these oil coolers work? What do they actually?
Well, like any other aftermarket product, it has an adapter kit which it sits sandwiched in between the oil filter and the engine. So it collects the oil that comes out of the motor from the scavenging pump, runs it through the oil cooler and then to the filter, and so runs it to the oil cooler, from oil cooler to the oil filter and then back into the motor. So basically it's a bypass system that bypasses the oil line that goes through the oil filter and bypasses through the oil cooler. So the hot oil that comes out of the motor goes first to the oil cooler and then back into the oil tank. So yeah, that's how it works.
And that really, especially in high performance motorcycles, engines, that really helps to.
Well, it's basically, even water cooled motors, they do have oil coolers. Yeah, the high performance water cooled motors, they do have oil coolers to keep the oil in temperature, because what happens is, even if the motor is cooled down by water, which is not the case in a Harley engine, the oil still is going to hot up more than it should. Yeah, and the best way is to cool it down to keep the temperature under control, because depending on the grade of the oil and the manufacturer of the oil, but usually for the Harley oils, as a rule of thumb, when they reach 120 degrees Celsius, the oil starts to break apart. So it doesn't hold this viscosity anymore, becomes like water.
Yep.
And obviously that generates premature wear and tear on the motor. So yeah.
So what temperature would this? How much would it reduce it by?
These oil coolers, they're designed to. They basically designed in a very similar system with your water cooling system on a car. So it has a thermal fan, it has a thermostat with a temperature sensor, which when the oil reaches 100 degrees, so it goes up towards its higher level, the thermal fans kick in and they fan force the oil to drop it down in temperature. So even if you're running in a very hot environment, it's a really hot day, like in the 40 degrees, 45 degrees Celsius, and you go into traffic, every Harley owner knows that's it's a really bad situation to be in with a Harley when you go on and off, the motor just cooks itself to death. And even with a stock motor, you can have temperature issues. But when you have a hot up motor, it's basically a no-no. You literally ruin the motor trying to do that, because the motor, it can't cool itself and it will burn itself to death. So you do need some sort of a cooling system.
So just on that, if worst case scenario, you get stuck in traffic and it looks like you're going to be stuck there for an hour in traffic, your recommendation is pull over and just
Absolutely, yeah. So if you do have a high performance engine, you do not have this oil cooler, a minimum safety feature, what you should have a temperature gauge in your oil tank to check, keep an eye on the oil. And if the oil reaches 120 degrees, you just pull on the side of the road and let the bike cool down, because you're literally cooking the motor. As you sit there, the motor cooks itself to death. And it's very common. We saw it over the years many times when people build budget performance engines, which the motor works fine. I mean, delivers the power, but that's only one aspect of building a performance motor. You know, you build a performance motor, and if you drag race it, or you start it, race it, stop it, that doesn't matter. But when you use it on the road, that motor goes through a totally different process. So it's not a race motor anymore, it's a street motor with race capabilities, and that involves more money. It's not the same thing as you build an engine that runs for 5 minutes and then you switch it off. So yeah, these are aspects that need to be considered, and they are at least as important as the quality of the engine build.
So what's the approximate price to get one of these Ultracool oil coolers installed?
Well, we sell them for, depending on the bike, obviously, they anywhere in between $1,000 and $1,100 installed.
But that's a very good investment when you consider you're spending how much on the engine.
Exactly. Well, if you build a $10,000 motor, you're talking about a 10% extra that not only gives you the peace of mind, but it literally extends the life of the motor considerably, especially in Australia, where the temperatures, they do go up in the summer, and traffic, as we all know, can be a problem sometimes. You can literally damage the motor in a couple of days. We saw situations where motors, they've been damaged in a couple of weeks of riding in the city and traffic and all that. They just literally cooked themselves to that pretty quick, because the temperature, all the internal parts of the motor, they're designed to reach to sustain a certain temperature for a certain period of time. Once you exceed that, you went over, basically. So
question, why on earth wouldn't Harley bring them out already as a standard feature on a motorcycle?
Well, for once, we're talking about a high performance motor. The Harley motor has 70 horsepower at the rear wheel. And it was designed from factory to support that temperature. So once you increase that horsepower, even honestly, if you put a stage 2 cam, which increases the power output at the rear wheel for 20, give or take about 20%, 15%. So that's fine. But once you get over that 15-20% threshold, you literally getting over. So then, when you get a stage 4, stage 5 kit, which delivers 40-50% more power at the rear wheel, you're basically generating far more heat, and it's an air-cooled motor. So you cannot dissipate that heat fast enough. And especially when the biggest problem again, comes when you sit in traffic, you go on low speeds, you get very little air movement around the motor to get rid of the heat, and the motor just can't cool. It's just, you literally cook it.
So even with a stock motor, should you be careful, obviously, even if you're stuck in traffic?
Look, yes, we've seen it over the years. You do have to be in a very extreme situation, like if you go on a motorcycle parade or something, and you get like 1,000 motorcycles, and you sit there forever waiting for the leader to move, or something happens, or and you're just sitting idling for 20 minutes, which normally in traffic it's pretty hard to get. Like it's very rare. So there are particular situations when even the stock motors struggle, but to cook the motor, a stock motor probably not. It helps it, absolutely. It will help it. To have an oil cooler, absolutely. In situations like this, having an oil cooler, you got your peace of mind. You don't have to stress about it. but it will be a much rarer situation. When you start holding up the motor,
Then it becomes more critical.
it becomes more critical because you don't have to sit for 20 minutes in traffic to overcook the motor. You don't have to, in 5 minutes time, sitting in traffic, like every 3 or 4 minutes, you have to stop again for a red light or whatever other reasons, you can actually feel it getting warmer and warmer and hotter. And it gets to a point where it literally burns you in the inner side of your leg. That's when you know the motor is 300 or 400 degrees. And even if the engine itself, it doesn't get damaged, it cooks all the gaskets. So before you know, you're going to start having oil leaks on the rocker covers and all that. And people say, well, why is the Harley always leaking? Well, you hold up the motor runs the hips hotter, and the gaskets, they're not designed to do that. So they just cook themselves to that, and they start leaking. And that's what's happening.
So there you go, guys. Ultracool oil coolers, I think, are a really good thing. I know there's other brands on the market, but
of course, yeah. Look,
you recommend these, obviously?
The main reason, I personally believe, but again, it's a subject opinion based on my own preferences, I believe these are one of the best systems in the world, mainly because it's the only one that I know of which comes in a very neat, compact package with thermal switch.
Yep.
And it actually works exactly like the cooling system on a car.
Yep.
Switches itself automatically on and off, keeps an eye on the oil temperature for you, and I actually installed one on my bike first time a few years ago when I first got in touch with them, and I was more than impressed because having a stage 6 on my bike, I always had issues with temperature. I couldn't cool down the bike. Once I put that oil cooler kit on.
Sorry, yes, that's right. He did say stage 6. This thing was an animal.
Yeah, and it just dropped the temperature. Like, I could not believe the difference. It was just phenomenal. Like, it was literally a big difference. It was, sometimes you install stuff on your bike and you think, oh, yeah, I can feel the difference. It is definitely something there, but maybe not as much. This is definitely one of those products. It gives you a wow factor when it comes to temperature. If you have a high performance engine and you install one of them, straight away, it's a big difference.
So there you go, guys. $1,100 investment, I think, is cheap when you consider the price of the bike, especially when you consider the price of some of these performance builds. So once again, thanks to the guys down at GRM Performance. We'll catch you next time on the Harley Roadshow. See you then.